Let's be real. Who hasn't tried to fix a broken heart with a Bandaid Boo? They look good, feel good, smell good, but like a cheap adhesive, they never stick. For those who don't know, a Bandaid Boo is a rebound, the void filler, the person who temporarily makes you feel good, but doesn't heal the wound. They're like a soothing balm for heartbreak, but the relief is fleeting. Now, let me keep it real with you guys. After a breakup, the temptation to grab a Bandaid Boo is real. I've been there. You've been there. But what happens when the Band-Aid falls off? You're left staring at the same wound you were trying to ignore. Today, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of it all, identifying your emotional wounds, figuring out if it's too soon to deal with someone new, or asking yourself the big questions like, is sex post-breakup a healthy step forward or just another way to mask the pain? So grab your cup of cozy or whatever you're sipping on, and let's sift through this topic and chat. Hello, hello, hello. This is Linda, aka Lou, your host, and welcome back to Say It Forward with Lou, a community for healing, growth, creativity, and positivity. Let's dive in and sift through this topic and chat today. So today we're diving into a topic that's real, raw, and oh so relatable, the infamous Bandaid Boo, the rebound, the void filler, the one that feels good in the moment but doesn't actually heal the wound. We'll talk about identifying those emotional wounds and how the dangers of masking those temporary fixes, and how faith, reflection, and real healing can lead us to something far greater than a quick fix. And we're keeping it honest, a little humorous, and always faith forward. So again, grab your cup of cozy if you haven't already and settle in and let's go. So for those who don't know, a Bandaid Boo is the rebound, the void filler, the person who temporarily makes you feel good, but doesn't actually heal the wound. They're like a soothing balm for heartbreak, but the relief is fleeting. So let's start with the wound itself. I'm talking about the emotional one, not the physical kind. Although the metaphor works perfectly, imagine having a deep, open gash. Instead of cleaning it out and stitching it up, you just slap a Band-Aid on it. It might look okay for a second, right? But underneath, that wound is still raw, festering, and getting worse. Bandaid Boo's sort of like that Band-Aid, right? For me, it took a minute to realize that some of my post-breakup behaviors wasn't about moving on. It was about covering up. I wasn't dealing with the heartbreak. I was avoiding it. And underneath all that avoidance were some deep wounds, rejection, abandonment, and fear of being alone. So let me give you an example. Have you ever found yourself after a particularly tough breakup texting someone new almost immediately? Like, why? Not because you were necessarily ready to connect, but because you couldn't handle the silence. That silence, right? It's not just quiet, but it's your emotions screaming for attention. But instead of listening, you distract yourself with someone else, right? So take a moment to think about this. When you're heartbroken, what's the first thing you run to? Is it comfort food? A Bandaid Boo? Or do you sit with yourself and process the pain? Be honest with yourself. because it's truly the first step towards healing. So let's talk about trauma bonds versus true connection, because they can feel so similar, right? So a trauma bond happens when two people connect through their pain. It's intense, it's consuming, and it can feel like love, but it's not. Think about those Bonnie and Clyde type of roller coaster relationships that we see in a lot of rom-coms, those romantic comedies, right? They make dysfunction look romantic. But when you're real about it, love isn't supposed to leave you emotionally drained. I remember in my dating history that I once dated someone who seemed like the perfect match at the time, right? And it wasn't until I realized that we were bonding over shared heartbreak. We talked for hours on how other people had hurt us, but we weren't building anything really positive. We were just feeding off of each other's wounds. It felt deep and connected at the time, but looking back, it wasn't love. It was survival. And so I want to talk about red flags that will help us spot or better identify a potential trauma bond. Some of them could be emotional highs followed by crushing lows, or feeling like you can't let them go, even if they're not good for you, or mistaking their attention for true care and connection. Now, listen, if you're fighting like some of them couples on your favorite dramedy reality show, but posting selfies like your couple's goals, relationship goals, you might be in a trauma bond. And you know what I'm talking about, right? So let's take a second and think about this. Are you bonding with someone because they help you feel safe and seen, or because they help you avoid the hard work of healing? So let's dive deeper a little bit more into talking about that. So we just talked about identifying red flags to spot a trauma bond, right? So let's talk about those red flags, those that scream trauma bond louder than a fire alarm, right? And a trauma bond can feel like love because it's intense and it's passionate and it's all consuming at times, right? But here's the truth. It's rooted in pain, not in genuine connection. And if you're not careful, it can trap you in a cycle that is hard to break. So let's talk about the red flags to look out for. The first one I mentioned was emotional highs and lows. So what does that mean? Well, when it's good, it's euphoric, right? It feels like everything is spectacular. But when it's bad, it's devastating. It's the relationship that feels like a roller coaster. 1 minute you're on cloud nine, you prancing around and dancing around singing John Legend, walking on cloud nine, so high. That's how you feel, right? You feel like you're walking on cloud nine. But then the next minute, you're questioning your entire existence. So those emotional highs and lows. And I remember there was somebody that in my past I dated, right? And they would shower me with compliments one day, and then the next day they would completely disappear. I started calling them Kaiser Sose. And if you know anything about The Usual Suspects, right, that movie, and like that, he disappeared. That's exactly what it would be. It would be like these days filled with, oh my gosh, you're the best thing since sliced bread. And then the next day you're like, abracadabra, I made him disappear. Like, what in the world? All right. So you start questioning your entire existence. And so that inconsistency kept me hooked because I always was chasing the high of their good days. So I want you to ask yourself, am I addicted to the highs? And I'm always going to advocate for writing. So journaling can help you track these patterns, right? I want you to see if the relationship is more pain than peace. And spoiler alert, for real, if you're crying more than you're smiling, it's probably a red flag. So another red flag to look out for. Do you feel stuck or unable to let go? You know it's not good for you, but you can't seem to walk away. It's like you're emotionally tied to the person, even when they hurt you. And again, my own experience of staying in a situation far longer than I should have because I told myself they just need time to change, but y'all, people don't change unless they want to. So what can you do, right? So you can write down the pros and the cons of staying and be brutally honest, because if the cons outweigh the pros, it's time to let go. It's time to chuck the deuce and be like, I need to move on. And then talk to a trusted friend, seek out a therapist or a spiritual advisor, someone that can give you an outside perspective that is supporting of you, right? Number 3, mistaking intensity for love. Been there and done that too. Trauma bonds often feel like they're meant to be, right? Because the intensity tricks you into thinking it's passion or destiny. But intensity isn't love. It's chemistry mixed with some chaos, right? Think about, I don't know if any of you watch Friends, but think about like Ross and Rachel's relationship on Friends, that back and forth drama. It wasn't really love. It was dysfunction dressed up in romance and a little bit of comedy. But when you really look at the core of it, it was dysfunctional, right? So what I want you to do is take a step back and evaluate. Does this person make you feel safe and secure, or do they keep you on edge? Because healthy love is calm and steady and not chaotic or nerve-wracking. And one of the things I started doing was saying, how does this make my nervous system feel? Right? Because if it's chaotic, if it's any confusion, it's a no. It should be calm and it should be steady and it should be in alignment with my core values, right? Number 4, over justifying their behavior. Done that too. So if you're constantly making excuses for their bad behavior, that's a red flag. They cancel plans. Oh, they're just busy. They snap at you. They're just stressed. Sis, bro, no. Consistent bad behavior isn't excusable. It's a pattern and it's a red flag. Listen, if you got a 10-point PowerPoint for real presentation ready to explain why their red flags are actually green and everyone else is colorblind, right? It's time to reevaluate. So what do? Well, first, we can stop rationalizing their behaviors and actions and start prioritizing our own feelings. And then secondly, setting boundaries and see if they respect them. And if they don't, that's your answer. So, all right, you spotted the red flags, right? Now what? That's the big question. Now what? I see the red flags. What do I do with them now? So let's establish a game plan. 1, acknowledge it. That's the first step, is admitting to yourself that this is probably a trauma bond and not true love, right? This can be hard because it forces you to let go of the fantasy you've built around this person. 2, detach gradually. Trauma bonds don't break themselves overnight. You have to start by creating emotional distance. Limit your communication. Avoid situations where you'll be tempted to connect, reconnect, and focus on rebuilding your own life and your own self, right? 3, seek support. We mentioned that earlier. Talk to a therapist, a trusted friend, a spiritual advisor, someone who can help you navigate without judgment, because healing is something that you do not have to do alone. And then lastly, replace the bond with healthy habits. Invest that emotional energy into things that uplift you, whether it's a new hobby or reconnecting with your faith. That was a big one for me. or simply spending time with people who truly care about you. And y'all, I can't talk about healing, growth, or even letting go without bringing up my faith. And that's been my anchor in every storm I faced, breakups included, and even walking through divorce. And when I think about those moments, when I felt lost, when I felt tempted to slap a Band-Aid on a wound, haul up a Bandaid Boo, right? My faith was the thing that kept me grounded. And I'll be honest, it didn't always feel comforting at first. Sometimes leaning into faith feels like God is handing you a mirror and saying, daughter, baby girl, we've got some work to do. And I'm like, God, can we just skip to the blessings part? Like, please, pretty please. But he's not a genie. He's a healer. And healing requires trust. And let's be real. After a breakup, we want quick fixes. We want to feel better now, yesterday, right? But faith is about trusting God's timing. Even when you're staring at your phone, waiting for a text that's not coming. Following my faith can be a lonely road sometimes, right? Phone, I say, my friends laugh at me. I'm like, my phone has been dry as a chip. People weed their own selves out because they know that with certain boundaries and certain ways that you're moving, they either have to come full intentional about you or don't come. And that usually leads to them not coming, right? So that kind of gives you an idea of what their true intention was in the first place. So I remember times praying, God, bring them back, or they'll do better. I'll do better. You know, we could work through X, Y, and Z. And you know what he told me? Lou, that person wasn't meant for you in the first place. And that was a hard pill to swallow, right? But looking back, I see God was protecting me from something that wasn't aligned with his purpose in my life. And when I say my faith is my anchor, it means it's the thing that steadies me when the waves hit. Let's be honest, grief, heartbreak, and loneliness don't come with a manual, but God does. His word has everything you need to heal, grow, and thrive. And one verse that kept me going was Psalm 147:3. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Y'all, that verse hit me differently when I was crying in my car outside of Target or driving to work, when I would have to, go into the bathroom in between seeing patients and clients and wipe my eyes and gather myself. I realized God wasn't just going to heal me halfway. Ain't no such things as halfway, right? With God. He was going to bind up the wound completely. No Bandaid Boos, no temporary fixes, just real, lasting healing. And I used to think prayer during those times, I used to think prayer was just about asking God for stuff, right? But I've learned it's also about listening. Sometimes I would pray, God, why am I still hurting? God, why is this so hard? And his response was, because I'm still working on you. And one night, as I was journaling, as I was writing and praying, it hit me. I was holding on to relationships because I thought they defined my worth. But God was like, nope, your worth is in me, baby girl. And that realization was like a weight lifting off of my shoulders. So if you're struggling to hear God, I'm going to always advocate for you to write. Journal your prayers. Write down your thoughts, your pain, your questions, and then just allow yourself to sit in the stillness. The scripture for Psalm 46:10 says, be still and know that I am God, because you might not get an answer right away, but trust me, he's listening. And can we talk about how God has a sense of humor. Like, I would pray for patience, right? God, give me patience. And then he would send the most annoying person in my path just to test me, right? Or I'd be like, God, send me a sign. And then I'm seeing every scripture about waiting, right? But even in those moments, right, I've learned to laugh and trust that he knows what he's doing. It's like when your GPS reroutes you, right? You might be annoyed because it's taking longer, but then you realize it's saving you from traffic or an accident, or in my case, saving me from my own bad decisions. And the beautiful thing about faith is it doesn't just anchor you, it transforms you. When I surrendered my pain and my plans to God, he didn't just heal my heart. He expanded my vision. He showed me that my worth wasn't tied to a relationship, a title, or anyone's opinion. It was rooted in him. So I want you to ask yourself, what's been anchoring you lately? Is it God, or is it something temporary like a Bandaid Boo, social media validation, busying myself with distractions? Because here's the truth. Only one of those things can truly hold you steady. And y'all, we've said this before, healing isn't linear, and faith doesn't mean that you won't have bad moments, bad days. But what it does mean is that you're never walking this journey alone. God is with you every step of the way, even when it feels like nothing is changing. So lean on him, cry to him, laugh with him, and remember, he's not just the God of get over it. He's the God of let's grow through it. And trust me, when you let him lead, the life he'll build for you is better than anything you could have imagined. And as I have said before, he will blow your mind. So, okay, let's get into it. Sex post breakup. Let's talk about sex, baby. It's a hot topic, and everyone has an opinion. But here's the question. Is it helping you heal, or is it just another way to mask the pain? So let's break it down. Sex isn't just physical, right? It's emotional. And after a breakup, your emotions are already fragile. Jumping into something physical too soon can actually deepen the wound instead of healing it, right? I thought engaging with someone new would make me feel better. And in the moment, I guess it did. But afterwards, I felt emptier than ever because I wasn't emotionally ready for that level of vulnerability. So I want you to ask yourself, am I engaging in this because I truly feel ready, or because I'm trying to distract myself from pain? When you're intimate with someone, you're creating a bond, whether you mean to or not. And if that person isn't invested in your well-being, that bond can leave you feeling used or unfulfilled. So if you're considering sex after a breakup, take a moment to evaluate. Is this person safe, respectful, and aligned with what you want emotionally? And if not, it is okay to say no. Sometimes what we're really craving isn't sex. It's closeness, comfort, validation. And there are other ways to meet those needs without complicating the healing process. They may not be as fun, right? But there are some alternatives. And I know y'all are just sitting there anxious on the edge of your seat. What are the alternatives, Lou? Well, one, spending time with friends who uplift you. That's been a big one for me. I've spent lots of times with my friends, my best friends, And sometimes, brunching, dinner, going out, doing, activities that we like, sitting across the table saying, I'm looking in your face again. And I say that jokingly and lightheartedly, right? But, yes, would it be nice to sit across the table from a handsome, good looking, smelling good gentleman? Of course. Yes, it would. But not at the sake of my peace, my well being, and things that are not aligned with your core values, right? So, but yes, one alternative, spend time with friends who uplift you. Two, dive into self care, something like a spa day or a creative project, right? Hint, hint, podcasting, writing, journaling. Um, I've done lots of things that, dealt with self care, self love, things that I liked to do and enjoy doing. And then explore platonic intimacy. Things like deep conversations. There's nothing better to me than having a deep, intellectual, fun, a conversation that has range. You can go from talking about something serious to something like totally ridiculous and funny with someone that you trust. Like, I think that is one of the best forms of intimacy is platonic intimacy and good conversation, right? So at the end of the day, there's no one size fits all answer to the sex question. But what I will say is this: don't let it be a band-aid. Take a moment to pause and ask yourself what you really need. Because chances are it's not just a physical connection that you're looking for or feeling or wanting, but an emotional and a spiritual one too. And here's why Bandaid Boos feel so good at first. They're attentive. They're charming. Like I said, they look good, feel good, smell good, right? And they know exactly what to say to make you feel better in that moment. But here's the catch. They're not here for the long. They're for here and now. Think about some of the celebrity couples and rebounds or people that you know in real life. How often does that last? I'll wait. Exactly, right? Bandaid Boos are designed to be temporary. And I remember in my dating past, looking back, that I dated someone and it seemed like he had it all together. He was tall and funny and called me queen every morning and beautiful and gorgeous. But after a few weeks, I realized that this queen was sharing the crown with other queens, right? And it became clear that he wasn't invested in me. He was invested in the idea of me, right? The accessibility that I was giving him to me. Bandaid Boos often reflect what you want to feel, but not who you actually are. So, send me, that would be kind of fun. Send me your funniest Bandaid Boo stories. I want to hear about the dates that were cute, but never meant to last. And maybe I'll share them on a live with Lou anonymously. Okay. But let's talk about the alternative to Bandaid Boos, right? The real healing. It's not quick. It's not easy. And it's definitely not as fun as a rebound can feel. It's not as fun as the Bandaid Boo can feel, right? But it's so worth it. So where do we start? Well, first, pause, reflect, grow. So when you say pause, Lou, what do you mean? Well, stop distracting yourself and sit with your feelings. Reflect. What did the relationship teach you about yourself? And then grow. Dive into something that brings you joy or fulfillment, like a hobby or therapy or faith. And I said, for me, the faith component for me has been a game changer. God doesn't just cover up wounds. He heals them completely, and he takes what's broken and makes it whole again. So the faith component was a major deal, the most important for me. So let's break this down a little bit further, because pause, reflect, grow. Okay, Lou, that sounds nice, right? But what does it mean in real life? Healing after a breakup isn't just a buzzword. It's a process, right? And each of these steps is essential if you want to move forward whole and healthy. So let's talk about it. So the first step, pause. Y'all, this is the hardest step because it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because after a breakup, we're so quick to want to move. We text our friends. We might hop on a dating app. We schedule, or we try to schedule every hour of the day so we don't have to feel the weight of the silence, right? But here's the thing. Healing doesn't happen in the noise. It happens in the stillness. It happens in the silence. It happens in those quiet moments. And when I paused, right, I set a rule for myself. No dates, no checking in, no numbing behaviors like scrolling on social media or binge watching TV. Instead, I created space for quiet. I created space to be still. I journaled, I wrote, sat in my thoughts, I prayed, I meditated, and I cried when I needed to. And I cried a lot. And it was so healing, right? And then one day in my quiet time, I realized I wasn't just mourning the relationships. I was mourning the version of myself that I thought I'd be with that person. And that's a hard realization to face, but I wouldn't have gotten there if I didn't pause. So what does that look like for you? Well, maybe take 10 to 15 minutes every day to sit with your emotions. Turn off your phone, your computer, detach from your devices. Find a quiet space and just be. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. So that leads us into reflect. So you're in your quiet space, you're pausing. Now it's time for reflection. This is where you start asking the hard questions, the real questions, right? Like, I remember I made a list of like my last 3 relationships, my marriage being my longest and most recent relationship, but the last 3 relationships I had been in. And I started looking for patterns. And guess what? There were some common threads. I kept choosing people who made me feel seen, attention, right? But not supported, intention. And so that's why I realized attention does not mean intention about me. They were not intentional about me. They gave me attention. It was fun, but to be intentional about the things that actually mattered, no. And people who matched my energy in the beginning, I was attracted to, but they couldn't sustain it over time. And reflecting helped me realize that my wounds were playing a role in my choices, right? I was chasing validation instead of true connection. So have you ever asked yourself, it's like, I seem like I pick the same people. It's like the same spirit, the same energy in a different body, right? And so you have to start asking yourself, what drew me to this person in the first place? Did this relationship reflect what I truly value? Or was it based on fear and insecurity? That's a big one for me, because I would say I want A, B, and C. When I finally identified my core values and I looked, it was like I was very dishonorable to what I said my core values were. I wasn't following or dealing with individuals who aligned with my core values. And then the last question, what part of me needs healing before I can show up fully in love? Because it's not always the other person, right? Can't always be the other person, right? It's like, if I am not identifying the areas that I need to heal, my emotional wounds, my inner child wounds, then how can I then heal them if I don't identify them? And then how can I truly show up fully in love to be loved and give love? So again, always points back to yourself in that. Can't always be the other person all of the time. So what do you do? Well, again, grab your journal, right? Write. Use your voice memo app. Reflect on those questions. What drew me to this person in the first place? Does the relationship reflect what I truly value, or was it based in fear, insecurity? And what part of me needs healing before I can show up fully in love? Because this is where the growth begins. And then finally, grow. That's the last one we said, grow. And let me tell y'all, this step is where you reclaim your power. You know, we had Auntie Maxine say, reclaiming my time. When we're reclaiming our power, because growth isn't just about moving on, it's about moving forward with intention. And after reflecting on my patterns, I decided to focus on myself in ways that I hadn't before. Doing therapy, you know, we did therapy here and there throughout our marriage, going through counseling for various reasons. But it wasn't until I started focusing therapy on Linda, on Lou, right, that I started to see growth and a difference and a shift. Started doing things that brought me joy, not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I wanted to reconnect with myself. So for me, growth also meant reconnecting with God. I started praying differently, not just asking for healing, but asking for clarity, asking for peace, asking for purpose, asking for discernment, asking for wisdom. And let me tell you, when you grow in your faith, it changes everything. It is such a game changer. So what do I want you to do? Pick one thing you've always wanted to try but never had the time, or say you don't have the time. It could be a creative hobby, a fitness goal, something as small as reading a book that's been on your shelf for a while. Whatever it is, do it. Because growth happens when you step outside of your comfort zone, right? So here's what I want you to remember. Healing can be messy. I like to say complex. I don't like the word messy. Complex. But it's also beautiful. I started saying the journey of healing is beautiful. It's not always pretty, right? It's not. But when you pause, reflect, and grow, you're not just healing from a breakup. You're building a stronger, wiser, and more whole version of yourself. So what's your next step? Maybe it's taking a day to pause. Maybe it's journaling your reflections. Or maybe it's finally signing up for that class you've been talking about, right? Whatever it is, do it for you, not for anyone else. And remember, you are worth the effort it takes to heal. So as we wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you with this. Healing isn't about finding a quick fix. It's about surrendering to the process and trusting God's plan is greater than any temporary comfort we could chase. Whether it's letting go of a Bandaid Boo, stepping away from old habits, or leaning deeper into faith, know this: healing is worth the work, and you're not doing it alone. So thank you for spending time with me today. If this episode spoke to you, share it with a friend who needs it, who could use a little bit of inspiration, and let's keep the conversation going. We'll be diving a little bit deeper and talking about some key takeaways and doing some fun interactive activity on the live with Lou later on this week. And don't forget to follow, subscribe, and leave a review so we can keep saying it forward together, right? And so until next time, stay rooted in faith, keep healing, and remember, you are worthy of the real thing. No Bandaid Boos, right? I love y'all. And as always, stay tuned, stay a while, and let's continue to say it forward together. I look forward to chatting with you all again soon. Take care.